And I'm starting to think that maybe some of these accusations should be denied by the palace. I mean, I don't want a to and fro, he said, she said,
Yeah.
but this is actually sounding really unpleasant.
It's a big day today. It is Harry and Meghan Part 2. We have got people watching the latest 3 episodes of the programme on Netflix. Episode 3 criticises the media for its unfair treatment of the couple. Episode 4 begins with criticism of the palace before moving to the Daily Mail's reporting of a letter sent by Meghan to her dad.
They're telling the public, here's this whole letter. And when you're literally taking sentences out of paragraphs and words out of sentences, you want to print my letter, which you know you can't do legally, but you want to print it and paint a completely different picture of who I am and my relationship with my dad, and take out every single thing I said about how the media's manipulated you.
People are still scratching their heads going, how would the Mail have either the stupidity or the, whatever you want to call it, to print a letter between a daughter and a father? Well, the answer is simple. They knew the family would encourage us not to sue.
Let's speak to Libby Purves, who's a Times columnist. Of course, she has been watching again another couple of episodes for us. Morning to you, Libby. Libby, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Yes,
How are you holding up?
Only just, basically. It's heavy going, but they are now getting down to executing the threats which they have been making in a veiled manner through all these trails. It's very much, I mean, the narrative is royal jealousy. It goes right back to Diana. It's the whole thing, was Charles jealous of Diana, about et cetera, and how she's basically Diana all over again, and so on. There's a lot of that, and I'm afraid they use quite a lot of that shameful BBC interview. But, I mean, there are some kind of important accusations in it about what press officers do, and I think we're getting to the stage, and I hate this, that some of the press officers may need to make a statement about the things which are actual lies. And the other actual lies repeated, that she simply wasn't allowed to go and get any help or therapy, when they were actually involved with a therapy charity. I mean, that seems extraordinarily unlikely to me. But there's a curious thing which says that this row with the Mail, which seems to me not to be all that important. I mean, we've all had rows with tabloids, but the business of the letter, that them suing was the catalyst. So that was the catalyst. That was what made them leave. That was what made it all fall to pieces. But before that, they've been explaining that before that they were wanting to leave a lot and they were very unhappy anyway. So that catalyst thing doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
But they're making that into a big thing. The Sandringham summit is the big thing, where he actually sort of says, William was screaming and shouting at me, and my father was getting angry, and the Queen just sat there, and they made sure Meghan wasn't in the room, and all the rest of it. And that starts to be damaging. I mean, that starts to be properly damaging. And the other damaging line to me was them and their partner, the media, as if the palace and the media walked in lockstep, which the more you think about it, the more absurd it is. But to them, this is their truth. And this is, these two forces allied against this gallant little couple, just fighting to have a happy life.
Right. Let's hear.
Upset at being insulted.
Yeah. Let's hear some more clips. They were fed up with the pursuit by the media, and they both considered moving abroad. Well, they did in the end anyway. But this is originally it was New Zealand, Canada, and South Africa that were all considered.
The palace signed off on us moving to South Africa. So my father's office knew about it, my brother's office knew about it, and my grandmother's office knew about it. No one else knew. It was very much an internal document. Then it was leaked to the Times newspaper. And then that whole plan was then scrapped. Okay, Canada. I was speaking to my father, this is the plan. And he says, can you put that in writing? And I said, I'd rather not, because of what happened last time. He says, I can't do anything unless you put it in writing. So I put it in writing, sent him emails on the 1st and the 2nd and the 3rd of January. And in one of those, I'd mentioned that, if this wasn't going to work out, then we would be willing to relinquish our Sussex titles if need be.
Goodness me, it's quite dramatic, isn't it? Also in episode 5, the couple talk about the way they see reporting in the media feeds into social media and creates a climate of hatred towards them.
Meghan just needs to die. Someone needs to kill her. Maybe it should be me. And he's just like, Okay. That's like what's actually out in the world because of people creating hate. And I'm a mom. It's my real life, you know? And that's the piece when you see it and you go, you are making people want to kill me. It's not just a tabloid. It's not just some story. You are making me scared, right? And like that night, to be up and down in the middle of the night, looking down my hallway, like, are we safe? Are the doors locked? Is security on? Is everything? That's real. Are my babies safe?
Libby, people seem to have quite strong opinions about Meghan and Harry, or both of them together. But I suppose the point is this: is that if everyone in this whole sorry tale seems to have been incredibly unprepared for everything. Literally everybody in this. Harry was unprepared, Meghan was unprepared, the royal family seemed to have been taken a bit by surprise at everything that happened. But ultimately, if you were to read on social media, and perhaps you need to take it with a pinch of salt, I don't know, that, oh, she needs to die, maybe I'll do it. I think that's a fair reaction that she had there, really, because you feel vulnerable.
Well, of course it is. I mean, ask J.K. Rowling, ask anybody.
Yes.
Death threats are awful. I've only had one, I have to say, and that was ages ago. But yeah, they're terrible. But the point that they do take the point that actually it's been proven that it's a very small number of accounts who are doing it extremely. That there's all sorts of VPNs, private networks, and so on that do this. It's a small number, but then they say, but it's amplified by British journalists in the mainstream, and that I think is interesting.
Yeah.
I think there is a tendency to say, oh, Twitter is saying. Well, Twitter is never saying anything.
Yeah.
Actually, Twitter is just a whole lot of people, and a lot of them typing in their bedrooms and being miserable with their lives. But it's. I mean, they are taking it very strongly, and they are starting to claim almost that the royal family is all in with it and will always roll over to it and will always offer up a sacrificial victim. She's very convinced that what the palace does is the moment there might be a rude story about somebody else, like say Prince Andrew, they will immediately feed them a titbit about Meghan being nasty. Now, this would have to be quite sort of systematic and quite deliberate. I've met palace press officers and they're quite buttoned up. And I'm starting to think that maybe some of these accusations should be denied by the palace. And I don't want a to and fro, he said, she said, but this is actually sounding really unpleasant. Let us also mention that an enormous number of the really nasty things they flash up on the screen about them are from the American press.
Yes.
They don't really acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But America has loved this story almost more than we have, because I think we're slightly bored with it in some ways now.
Yes.
And I think they're not really acknowledging that either, that they've got a much bigger and less harnessed tabloid media than we have. I mean, American, the Inquirer and so on, grim, make us look like saints. So I think that's sort of not acknowledged. But it's just terribly sad. The underlying thing is just so sad. And Harry constantly sort of standing, I had to protect my family. I had to protect Meghan. Meghan is so vulnerable. And then you get Meghan being kind of not particularly vulnerable, but absolutely running it there. So they're a pair. They're working together really quite effectively.
Okay, interesting stuff. Libby, thank you so much for that. You won't have to watch any more after this. We promise you. That is Libby Purves. She is a Times columnist with some very, interesting thoughts on that.